All
You
right, we got the scholars in the house. I'm just an invited guest.
Thank you for helping.
Oh, absolutely.
Fine.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys came. We actually just like started and you started coming. I came here like 9 minutes early and Patricia was already here. So
You're doing some good work, Aaron.
oh yeah, I appreciate it. So I have some questions prepared. I'm pretty sure you guys also have questions prepared too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, well I'll start off with the first question I like to ask all my guests is that can you tell me about yourself? When and where were you born and your childhood upbringing?
Okay, so I was born in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where my dad is from. My and I have siblings. So my dad was from Nashville, my mom was from Chattanooga. So I was born in Nashville. My sister was born in Chattanooga. And I don't know, this is not necessarily a part of the quote information that's needed, but I just give you a little bit of background. My dad lived in Nashville. He's originally from Bell Buckle, Tennessee, if anybody has ever heard of that. It's kind of up in the country, about 30 miles from Nashville. My mother was born in Chattanooga. And this was, God, however many hundreds of years ago. But in Tennessee, if you were a citizen in Tennessee then, they had just started the Tennessee, what was called Agricultural and Industrial University in Nashville. And if you lived in Tennessee and you were Black, if you went to Pearl High School in Nashville, that was a Black high school, of course. No integration there at that time. This was in the what year? The early 40s. You could go to Tennessee State free. So my mother was the youngest of 3 kids, and her siblings had gone to colleges, Black colleges, Hampton, and so on. Anyway, my mother, her grandfather lived in Nashville. Her grandparents lived in Nashville. So she went to live with them so she could go to Pearl High School, so she could go to Tennessee A&I State free. Okay, so my dad also lived in Nashville. In fact, 2 doors from Pearl High School. I never asked anybody because I don't know how them two got together, but this is the story about that. My mother was 15. My dad was like 18. And she went to, God, I guess the second half of her junior year, maybe. And my father's mother was going through his belongings and found a marriage license. They had been married since my mom was 15. They had been married like almost, not quite 2 years before this discovery happened. Okay. So of course, everybody went totally off the rail, totally. And by the time they found that out, my mother was pregnant with my sister.
Oh my goodness.
So that's how we got here.
Oh wow. That's
anyway. So that's how that all got started. That's how I got to be, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I don't know what you want to know about me, but I'm a graduate of Fisk because that's all that Nashville community. My grandparents' house was 2 blocks from Fisk University. Pearl High School was 2 doors from their house. So my dad went to both schools. He went to Tennessee State. He did music at Fisk, and then he ultimately went to the American Theological Seminary, ABT, American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So did you know Norma Freeman when she went to Fisk?
Absolutely. And Don after, of course, from my years here, but yeah.
He talked about going to Fisk with me and running into W.B. Du Bois. The great thing, and this is no secret about historically Black colleges, is just all the heroes and just artists and intellectuals. I mean, it's so much there. It's so much to know and so much to draw from, so much support. And you know, it's so interesting. The how you don't think about it when it's happening, because you don't know, like, can't look forward. So, you know, this is just everyday life, and you see these folks, and you chat on the street and go on about your business. And when I was at Fisk, Nick Giovanni was at Fisk, Judy Jameson was at Fisk, a whole bunch of folks. We were all students. So, you know, everybody was doing their thing, and nobody was thinking about anything special. We had, my class at Fisk was the Centennial class, 1966. So we had this big celebration, and Belafonte and Sidney Poitier. And they, when they showed up, they didn't show up like, okay, well, you know, this is all, I'm Sidney. They just kind of blend into the thing. John Killens was our scholar in residence, writer in residence rather. But it was just life. And, you know, in retrospect, then you said, oh my goodness, really? This really happened. Same thing with Dr. King, because he was just an ordinary person. Yeah. You know, none of that pretentious, any of that, fun and nice and just normal. So in retrospect, you look back and as being a part of that and just said, you know, that's good. I get it. I understand. It was a great experience, just growing up in that kind of environment.
Another guy who read my book was Jay Johnson, who became Obama's Secretary of Homeland Security. But his grandfather was the president of Fisk, or
Charles. Oh, wait a minute, Charles? Yeah.
Charles. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he is a great guy. He's a wonderful guy. What Norma just described, the richness of the environment, and exactly as you just said, like you were taking it for granted, and looking back, you're like, wow, I walked up.
Because that was just what our life was like. You know, that's what we did. We were in that era of hosiery. The big change that came while I was at Fisk for Women was you got to wear slacks on Saturday morning from the time you got up to 12 noon. I mean, that was revolutionary, right? Because you have all these things, all these rules about, well, Fisk women do X. They send you a letter telling you, this is what you bring. You need your black dress, your white gloves, your da-da-da-da-da. It's that kind of, I guess I would call it richness as you move through life, and you look at then and you look at now, and it's just amazing. It's transformative.
Yes, it is. Now, what brought well, you know, of course, we know your father was a pastor of Olivet, but his relationship with Dr. King, could you tell us?
My dad and Dr. King, as I remember the story, met in Birmingham in the 50s. And they were, of course, both pastors. And Dr. King had started, I can't remember what, it wasn't a quote SCLC then, but anyway, what he did was, after the Rosa Parks, you know, all of the Rosa Parks history and so on, he started to bring together ministers to kind of support this whole movement, because it was, and I'm not going to say church-based, but I'm probably more a Christian-based kind of philosophy, as we all know. But because they had stuff in common, and most of these were young guys in his age group, and then, you know, guided by elders like Dr. people like that. They're kind of hero mentor kind of, so that was a big Morehouse connection there anyway. So the Atlanta base became just the kind of, I guess, I don't know what I would call it, kind of organizing venue maybe for that. But they started building that movement in Birmingham, Montgomery, and Atlanta. And that's kind of how that, and if memory serves me, that's how that started.
How did your dad get to Birmingham, and how is that any relation? Fred Shuttlesworth was the guy there.
Fred Shuttlesworth, but this was pre-Fred Shuttlesworth. Fred Shuttlesworth was in Birmingham, and if I'm not mistaken, I think did he end up in Cincinnati?
Shuttlesworth?
He might.
Yeah.
Mm.
For some reason, I thought he ended up. I'm not sure. But I just remember there were these.
Mhm.
Okay, so during that time, Dr. King, what he had, what he called, I don't know if he called it this, they called it that, lieutenants. Andy Young was one, Bernard Lee was one. What was the Williams guy last name? They wore the overalls. You don't remember him? You know what I'm talking about. It'll come to me in a minute. Hosea. Yeah,
Right.
Hosea, James Orange, and later, Andy Young and Jesse Jackson later on.
Mhm.
Now, during that time, during this was after the march, sometime after the march, when Carl Stokes was running for mayor, then Dr. King became very involved in that, and spent a lot of time here. Please ignore that. So they had an apartment here. They had a house, an apartment here at the Park Lane Villa, where I lived at that time. And during that time, this was after the riots and during the Stokes campaign, and they were doing a lot of work out of Cleveland. And Eddie Osborne, who was the cousin of Coretta Scott King, kind of ran that operation here.
Mhm.
But this was when, like, I think Jesse Jackson might have been 26, and I mean, they were young guys. But they did a lot of work here around, kind of community building. But one of the kind of organizing things was the Stokes campaign, and getting both Carl and Lou, supporting both of them in a big way, because that's when we did rallies and folks would go out with the bullhorns and gather up masses of people and chat and so on.
I've seen the picture at Corey Methodist Church of Dr. King coming at the height of the Birmingham campaign in the spring of '63, and sitting right behind him is Carol Hoover.
Yes. Well, let me tell you about Carol Hoover. Carol Hoover went to Tennessee State. She was another one. I don't know what was happening with she and my mom and this early brilliance, education, smart people thing. But she went to Tennessee State at 16, and she was really into the movement, because that's when the marches started. And Diane Nash, you remember Diane Nash, that group, they were all in the same age group, and they did sit-ins at Woolworths and all these other places and got beat up and spat on and so on and so forth. So I guess it was the summer after her second year, she had been working with Dr. King. We knew him. So somehow the two of them decided that she was going to come to Atlanta and work for the summer, which she did do. But she never left. And I don't know how these people learn all this stuff, but what she ended up doing was they would have these big freedom festivals. I don't know if you remember, where all the stars would come and they raised money with these concerts all over the place. Aretha was one person, Belafonte, just all the Peter, Paul, and Mary, just a whole bunch of people dedicated their time and whatever. This was a fundraiser, a major fundraiser for that organization. And that's what she did. She arranged all that, she organized all that. Then she got branched out into the corporate thing. So when she went there, she never left. She never left until after Dr. King died. And then she came home at my dad's insistence. He said, just come home and decompress and just figure out what you're going to do next. And she never left. So that's how that worked.
Was she in Atlanta the entire time then?
Yeah, she was in Atlanta until Dr. King passed away.
And did she work with then Edwina Moss, who was down there?
Okay, they all see these people. Okay, there was Reverend Moss, who was part of the lieutenant thing, but Edwina Moss was Andy Young's secretary. They were all there together. They all kind of built, and when I say built the movement, I'm talking about the pieces and parts and everything it took to make that happen at that time. But yes, they were all there together.
Yeah, and I in looking at Edwina, or Wino, however you say her name, Moss's background, I thought, there was this film made about the hidden figures in the NASA space program. And these women, to me, are the hidden figures who they should make a film about in the SCLC and the civil rights movement, because sure sounds like they were awful important to what was going on.
Oh, they were. You had this woman named Septima Clark, who started all of the schools. And I mean, just when I say schools, they weren't schools, they were schools, because her thing was everybody's going to be educated about what this means, about what we doing means. There was Dorothy Cotton, who used to be Dr. King's secretary, who was just amazing. She taught it, she did everything. It's like, in retrospect, I just wonder, okay, well, how did these folks know all this? How did you just bring yourself, but you don't have any background and training in how to do, how did she even, how did you know how to do that? I mean, how do you know how to raise money and do stuff and connect people? Because that's another one of her skills. She is a relationship builder. Not then, but of course, over the years has become that. But it was like you just brought yourself there and you gave what you had, and it was just the right recipe, pulling all these folks together, and they were committed. And I think this was a labor of love, and they were committed. So
yeah. So did Carol come with Dr. King to Cleveland?
Yes.
To help him raise the bail money for the Birmingham campaign?
Absolutely. No, not for the Birmingham campaign.
I'm talking about her sitting behind him in May of '63 when he's there to raise bail money.
Yeah. Then that's the case. Yes. Yeah.
Because she's sitting right behind him.
Okay.
And she has said, at least to me, she said that Dr. King had the letter from Birmingham jail in his briefcase when he came up here.
Okay, and you know what? Those are details I don't remember. I remember something about the writing of the March on Washington speech on the airplane, but I don't remember it in detail well enough to even make an intelligent statement about it. But I remember those kind of landmark pieces, the letter and the March on Washington speech and the A. Philip Randolph stuff and that. But I don't remember because I didn't know y'all were going to be asking me all that.
So what were you doing during that time? I mean, what were you here in Cleveland?
What I was doing, well, I graduated from Fisk in 1966, and I came here and I worked. My first job was at the YWCA in Glenville. I had no idea what I was doing, but I did it, whatever it was, I did it. I was the youth director for whatever activities that the Y were doing. In my group was Stephanie Tubbs Jones, one of my teenagers. And I worked a lot with the Urban League because they had this really neat, that's when Bill Picard was here. And he had this youth community, the Urban League youth community. So we pulled all these kids together to kind of get them on track with what was going on, socially and otherwise. So that just worked. We would do workshops, whatever, any kind of, and other wholesome activities. So,
So were your parents
After-
here? Were your parents here already at Olivet?
oh, and my dad came to Olivet in 1952.
Yeah, okay.
1952. So, after that, I went to work at the NAACP because we had what we call the Afro-American History Culture School. So that's what I did then.
When you were in Glenville during that time, did you run into the more militant side of things with Harlow?
Oh God, yes.
Fred
Yeah.
Evans? Tell us about that.
Because that was like in the riot season.
Yeah.
With the Ahmed Evans and the burning down of Auburn, what was that street over there?
Auburndale.
Yeah, all of that, the Huff riots, all of that. Oh, yeah. And they were uppermost. Baxter Hill and who are these?
Lewis Robinson. Lewis Robinson.
Oh God, Lewis Robinson, Harlell X, remember him?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was all happening. That was all happening at the same time.
So did the groups you were in, did they mix with these groups or were they like totally separate?
No, because fortunately, and Don Freeman, he was a big part of that. I mean, he was considered a rebel or whatever, but the interesting thing about the people who were actually doing the quote leadership work, they knew how to bring them to the table. They could bring all those factions to the table. That's my memory, because clearly there was a time when everybody was calling somebody names. You're a Black nationalist, you're a Black Muslim, you're this, that, and the other. But somehow there were points in time that were, I won't say historic, I'll say legendary, that brought these folks to the table.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say at some points in time, there was a lot of mutual respect, as opposed to, at least we moved from that, the name calling and all of that, to relatively cohesive kind of group that could maybe disagree, but not do the lambasting. They grew through that. That's my memory.
There are photographs of Dr. King when he came to support Carl Stokes in '67, repeatedly meeting with Ahmed Evans and Lewis Robinson, and trying to bring them all in, and the United Pastors.
Yes. Oh God, yes. Yeah. But they went to them. That was the thing. We didn't have folks sitting back saying, okay, well, no, they went to the streets, they went to the neighborhoods, they went in peace, they showed up.
Yeah. Was your dad a part of the United Pastors group?
Oh yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm.
But when King came to town, he would stay where? Did he stay with your parents?
No, only his dad did that. No, his father, because his dad was just the most incredible man.
Daddy King.
And I would call him sweet. That's what I would call him. Out of all the other wonderful things you could say, he was a hero, he was brilliant. He was just a regular, sweet human being. Now, he would always stay there because he called and he said, okay, baby, I'm coming. He didn't stay in hotels. He said, I can't stay in hotels. I don't know who washed those sheets. And he would always order what he wanted to eat and, have Miss So-and-so cook me some such and such. So, no, he would stay at our house. But no, they stayed, they would stay. Like, I can remember the Sheraton Hotel was downtown. So they didn't do a lot of staying in houses. But as I said, for a period of time, and I'm trying to remember the exact years, it had to be, this was after Dr. King died. This was afterward. Am I right? This was afterward. Because, no, it wasn't. It was, I guess, maybe, let me see, in '67, maybe. they had that apartment here because it was a lot going on. And Eddie Osborne was in charge of the SCLC here. He was did you know him?
No,
Eddie, yeah, okay.
I know the name and I've read about it.
Yeah, okay.
And Dr. King was coming here that summer, like every 2 weeks, and doing things like mock grand jury trials. And
Yes, yeah. Cause he was kind of like known around town, you know what I mean? Just out and about and, not, but always engaging, wherever he was. Oh, I know another place they used to stay a lot. Remember, well, I don't know who remembers this. The Howard Johnson's at 107th and Euclid.
7th and Euclid.
That was the spot. That was the spot. That was one of the many spots. But I know there were a number of like celebratory events, fundraisers, dinners, and then we'd have them at the hotel downtown. So of course they would stay there. But he just kind of spotted himself as much in the quote community as possible then.
yeah, Stokes did not have him come down when he was elected that night.
I know that's still.
What's your version of that story?
I'm not sure what my version of that story is. I heard two versions of the story. The one you just said is Stokes wouldn't let him come down. And the other version of the story was that from the Stokes side was Dr. King told him no, he didn't want to go down because he didn't want to steal his moment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I think that was a mutual agreement there.
Yeah.
Now, were there, if you can recall, did Dr. King and actually come to Olivet? Or were there any moments where he was there and you're,
Oh, he's been there a number of times.
Okay.
Yeah, he's been there a number of times. Because we used to have what we call rallies. Remember the rallies?
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. He would come for rallies and all of that.
Olivet. Rallies at Olivet.
Dr. Bynum has joined us here. I don't know if you know Thomas.
Hello.
Hi, Thomas.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Sorry about being late.
Perfectly all right.
He runs what is it called?
The Black Studies program at Cleveland State.
Hey.
Have you ever heard about Curtis Wilson from the Black Studies program?
Yeah, he was one of
And
the.
Oconto?
Yeah.
Well,
I never
worked
met
there
him
with
personally, and I met Oconto, but I never met
Okay.
Curtis Wilson personally. But yeah. Mhm.
You worked with Curtis Wilson?
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
What did you say?
I said, you said you worked with Curtis Wilson?
I worked with Curtis Wilson. Remember I was telling you about the NAACP school that we had, the school after school program that we had?
Right.
Curtis Wilson was one of the teachers in the
Oh.
school after school.
Mhm.
Okay, so we worked probably about 3, maybe 4 years. I went to graduate school. I went to Case. And then when I graduated from Case, I went to work at Cleveland State, and he was the director of Black Studies there.
Oh,
Wow.
okay.
So I had history. Yeah.
Yeah, you crossed paths a couple of times.
What was, I want to go back to where we were in history. What was your father's, obviously the reaction. What was his, how did he deal with Dr. King being assassinated?
Mm.
That's a hard question. I know this. I know exactly where I was when I got the call from my sister about Dr. King. And then we were in that place where they had the apartment. I lived there downstairs. The other guys were upstairs. And I was cleaning out a drawer in my bedroom. I was sitting on the floor. And the phone rang. I picked up the phone and she was saying,
This is Carol.
yeah, well, she didn't have to say this is Carol. She was saying, do you have the news on?
Mhm.
And I said, no. She says, well, you need to turn it on. Dr. King has just been, well, she didn't say Dr. King had been killed. She said Dr. King has been shot. That's what she said. And then of course later the real deal came. But it was just one of those moments that you'll never forget. You know, the historic ones where you say, I know exactly where I was when this happened. I know exactly what I was doing. I know what I said. Yeah, and it was just amazing. We went to that funeral, and it was people from all over the world were in Atlanta, in the street, marching behind that coffin. And it was quiet and respectful, and it was just with all the sadness, etc. But there was a calm in that entire city that was just mind-boggling. You know, that's what it was. It was, and you know, there were people everywhere. All the hotels were filled, and you just walk up and down the street and see folks, and you know, nobody was being a star, and you know, none of that. It was none of that. It was just everybody was there. Everybody knew why they were there, and it was just a really amazing kind of experience.
Did your parents stay close with Daddy King and also Coretta Scott King after that?
Oh, well, yeah, because Carol went on to go on the King Center board. It was very instrumental in the development of that. And she and Coretta had been friends throughout. Then let me see. In fact, this is an interesting note, because as you know, we're Baptist. And my dad was old school Baptist. And when I say old school Baptist, that's what was going on then. So at our church, for example, there are still, well, not anymore, but there were 3 levels. So in the middle of the pulpit was it's a stage. And on both sides, there was a step down, and there's another little mini pulpits with microphones and so on. And women were not allowed to step. When my dad was there, if you were female, you couldn't come up on that pulpit, on that part. The little side things were for you. That was the way it was. And Coretta Scott King was the first person to step on that pulpit. And she came after Dr. King died, and she was the something for whatever big thing it was, big day. And she stood on that pulpit for the first. She was the first woman to do that.
Wow.
Amazing.
So your father opened that door. I mean, did she just step up there because she was?
No. Yeah. I mean, that's how she got up there. Because if it was, I didn't even go. I mean, I didn't have any reason to go up there because I didn't have much to say about anything. But it was just a foregone conclusion. You know, it wasn't like these are the rules and no woman could. It was the way things were. So it wasn't nobody challenging anything. But she was the first person.
Yes.
And you may have answered this question because I'm late to the interview. I was curious about your father's work with Dr. King in Montgomery, like with the bus boycott. Did he do anything?
There was not a lot of that going on at that point in time. They were colleagues, they crossed paths. But I think once the movement really got started, after my dad was here, then Dr. King went around and collected up his people. They, his supporters, and he was always organizing with young ministers and others. But when this really took hold, then he pulled the people together. He pulled his folks together. So that's how that whole kind of network part of support, when it really caught fire, that's how that happened.
Okay.
Because everybody had their own platforms then, or pulpits, I guess I would say.
Right.
So you just, you bring all that together. So then you get this mass of people and support. Because of course, when Dr. King came to town and he was gonna be at Olivet, well, you know, everybody at Olivet was, and all their neighbors and friends were just in a frenzy. I mean, that was all of it. That was, it didn't get any better than that doing that.
Right.
And you know, there were other leaders like Whitney Young and but they weren't even in the mix at all. That's my experience. You know, we knew they were there and that's what they were doing, but no, it was all about him.
Yeah.
In one of my footnotes in the book, I note that Coretta Scott King came to Olivet Baptist Church in 1970 at a Women's Day event.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
And a guy named Charles Sanders wrote about it.
Charles Sanders was our pianist, but Charles Sanders went on to
Ebony magazine?
Ebony magazine. Yeah. He worked for Ebony for years. He worked here at the Call Post newspaper, the one I was telling you threw all the stuff out the window in the garbage.
Yeah.
He worked for the Call Post as a writer. He was a master's in something, journalism or something, but he was a gifted musician. And he was one of the musicians at our church for years. And when he left there, he went on to Ebony and lived out his career there. Or Johnson Publishing, I guess I'd say.
Do you know if Olivet ever had any interactions with Malcolm X?
Did they have any what?
Interactions with Malcolm X? Did he ever come there?
He never came to the church, no.
Because he spoke at Corey Methodist Church.
But he never came. I'm pretty sure not, because clearly if Malcolm X had come to take, one, I would have been there, and two, I'm pretty sure no.
Yeah. He gave his ballot or bullet speech at Corey in April of '64.
Okay.
A year after Dr. King gave his talk from Birmingham.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Who was at Corey then?
I don't know. I
can't remember.
What was the relationship between your parents and Dr. Cavanis?
Well, they were colleagues. I would say that my dad, they were friends. I would say. I don't know what he would say, but I think he would say that too.
No, he says the same thing. And
yeah,
we're noticing the thing we're noticing about their paths. And we spoke with Cavanis. He said Olivet was an institutional Baptist church.
Well,
their church, Cavanis, was a missionary Baptist church.
Well, let me tell you how that came about, as I remember, because before there was Olivet Institutional, there was Olivet something. But my dad added that because of his, I guess, vision for that community there. That community, when we came here, it was like its own little town to a great degree. There was Karamu. There was what they call it, Standard Oil Station then, owned by this man named John Lewis. The first person to have anything like that, any kind of franchise like that. There was the Quincy Savings Bank. It was a community with businesses. You didn't have to leave there to go anywhere. There was the drugstore, the barbershop, the printing press. It was a neighborhood. So his thing was to build that community and then build out. So this whole notion of institution in terms of him was that there are many more things that we need to do. Oh, my thing's going out. Hold on a minute. Hold on, I gotta plug in my iPad's going out.
You're right at the best part.
Well, that's probably why it's going up. Let me see here. Let me plug it up right quick. Okay, I want to close. I don't know, it took this much. Okay. Am I back in?
Yes.
You still hear you?
I can't see anything. Oh, hold on.
Gotta probably hit your video.
Okay, let me see. And this is not gonna. Okay, so I don't know. It's still telling me. Because out of about many skills, this is not one of them. Okay, low power mode. It says close. So if I close, then what's going to happen? Wait a minute. Let me see. Somebody's.
It's just giving you a warning.
Okay, let me close and see what. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. Oh, Lord have mercy, y'all. Okay,
Right,
what were we saying?
so you're right in the middle of the institutional and
Oh, okay.
you know,
And that.
all encompassing area and so forth.
Okay. So I think the whole point of that was just to bring all those aspects to the community and maximize their effectiveness. Because everything was there. Like people didn't have to go downtown.
Right.
And if you went downtown there, a lot of it for Black people was like 105th and is everybody who's from Cleveland? Okay, yeah, 105th and Euclid and that whole area.
Yeah.
You get on the bus, you go downtown, it's a big deal. You get dressed up, go to public square, but it was all about community building. And, you know, there were residents there, there were houses across the street from the church and everybody, because my dad he would do stuff like, and most of those people belonged to the church, but he would go in their houses and he would sit on the porch and he would reprimand the kids and take them home if they were doing something they shouldn't be and go across to the deli, Jack's Deli. I think that's what that man's name was. He was there for years. And he would buy bologna, Colby cheese, and saltine crackers. And he would visit around the neighborhood in the lunchtime or whenever. And, you know, they would sit on the steps. He would offer the kids. It was just that kind of interaction. And we had what was called a storehouse at the church. So if folks needed stuff, they needed clothes, food, whatever, it was there for them to have. And everything was run by people who went to church, most of whom were from that neighborhood.
So it's the self-sufficiency idea that you are self-sufficient.
Well, that not only are you self-sufficient, but you are, what is the word I want to use? I'm not finding it. But it's an interdependency that there are people in places you can count on, that if that makes any sense. And maybe interdependency is not the word, but I can't think of one right now. But it was just like everybody was there helping each other and supporting each other and, you know, just being a neighborhood. So they had the little tagline, making our neighborhood a brotherhood. That was the tagline for once he built that community center, then that brought it all together. And, you know, this is who we want to be. And here's the place you could come and on and on. And
Those were the days.
Yeah, well.
What was the transition then from your dad to Otis Moss?
Well, he died. That was a major transition.
Right.
My dad.
Let me say it another way. I know that happened, but was Moss there already, or did they bring him?
No, he was in Cincinnati.
Okay.
Because, and I'm not trying to tell his story, but you remember he was in Atlanta for a minute with Daddy King.
Right.
And then went from there to, I can't remember the name, but Cincinnati. So of course my sister was here and they had to connect up. So she put his name on the list. I mean, he was one. I mean, he wasn't the only name on the list, obviously, but his name was on the list. So, and he and my dad were colleagues and friends. So it kind of all made sense because he wasn't a stranger here. I mean, Reverend Moss didn't come here a whole bunch of times, but they were connected through the movement. So that would be kind of a natural given the experiences of both of them. And when I say both of them, my dad and Odis Moss, that kind of experience together. He wasn't a natural, but almost a natural. I mean, he was a natural in a lot of people's mind, but that, I think that was the experience and personality that sealed the deal.
And your sister from her work was friends with Edwina Moss.
What did you say?
Your sister from her work in Atlanta with SCLC was friends.
Yeah, that's how they all met.
Yeah.
I have a question, and just thinking about it, what would you say was unique about your father's ministry when he was pastor, and what was unique about Reverend Moss as pastor? What stood out to you?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay. What stood out to me, I guess, you all aren't gonna quote me on all of this, are you? You're gonna at least make my statements make some sense, I hope.
They make sense now. They make sense now.
Absolutely. This is great. This is wonderful.
I think my dad, he had a big personality. He was a big man, big personality. He could sing. And he was just a people person. He was and he has, to me, he has so much respect for people, now whoever they were. That's my sense of him, because I remember how he would deal with those kids in the neighborhood by the church, because they call him Big Daddy, because he took no stuff from them, and their grandmamas and stuff would bring them up there. I'm gonna tell Reverend Hoover, and he would go sit on them stoops with them and pass out the orders. And I mean, just that he was an outgoing. He had that kind of. He had a big personality. And in contrast to that, the way I see Odis Moss he is very cerebral, very intellectual, very deep. And that's not to say he's not, it's just a total difference in their posture, in their physicality, I'll put it like that. My dad was a big man. Odis is this svelte, slim, deep, quiet. My dad was not quiet. Everything was about him. Big voice, big. And Reverend Moss is much more sedate, but very philosophical. He has that voice that would put you to sleep, and da 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 da. I mean, the two couldn't have been more opposite in terms of how they show up. I think them as human beings and people, of course, would share some of those qualities, but the one that stands out for me is just the total difference in how you see them, what you see when you look at them.
I would have loved to have heard your father preach.
I got some CDs, girl. I think he had like 4 of those, 4 or 5 albums, and I had them converted to CDs. So I'd be happy to share them with you.
Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to get together sometime.
Well, you know where I live.
I wouldn't be able to contain myself if you were breaking out in song. I heard
that's okay. That's what it's.
A few times. I was like, oh, okay, all right.
No, I'll get those. If you have my information, so I'll get them out.
I just have the email. I have to get your information.
Okay.
So I was kind of wondering, following up with Thomas' question, like what do you think your father's biggest legacy that he left at Olivet Institution?
Oh God, I hate that question, because I'll never know what that question means.
According to you.
Well, I don't know what it means, but really. And I think because it's a difficult question for me to answer for me, because my feeling is you are here and now, and we are in relation, whatever it is. And I think it's not so general. I think it's about how you relate to people and individuals and groups and people, and the impact you make on them right then as a result of that, rather than something that you quote leave. I don't even know if that's making any sense, but that's because I think your legacy is whatever impact you have on people, individuals. And I don't think it's all universal. It's not all the same thing. It's what you bring to people you engage with. So I probably didn't answer that question, but I don't think about it like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I just think about in relation, because everybody's impact can be totally, totally different to various people. So I don't have a generic thing. Oh, he leaves a legacy of love and all that. I don't know. I don't know.
Very good answer.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know. It's always a good answer and an honest one.
So what I get from you, listening to you describe your father, that where the church was, that there was a sense of accountability to the community, and
oh God, yeah.
The community was the center of what was happening. More so, maybe let me put it this way: the community was a reflection of what was happening, perhaps as an extension of the church.
Let me back up, because I want to finish the statement I started about the respect thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is my observation. Okay, so we had majority of our folks were from the South, of course.
Mhm.
And you know how the whole migration happened, that your cousin comes up north and makes a way for everybody else to come, and the relatives and nephews and grandmas and all of those folk. And folks live together in the same house.
Mm-hmm.
It was just you just come and you make space. You make space for your folks to have a better life. Now, when I was talking about the respect thing, I remember, like, there were a lot of folks here that went to our church from the South, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, all over the place. So many of them came because there were jobs available, of course, in manufacturing, all the stuff that was going on, steel milling and all of that. And Black people came here. They were able to get those jobs, and those were considered good jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And the car factories and all of those places. And they made their way to church. Now, the interesting thing about it, so many people were illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that, I'm not saying uneducated, I'm saying
Right.
illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
That were able to get those jobs, make good living, buy homes, have families, etc. All their collars were blue for the most part. And what I would notice, like at our church, one of the institution parts was there was something going on there every evening, every day, either a choir rehearsal, the deacon meeting, the such and such, the some club. It was always open. Mm-hmm. There was something happening every day of the week. And this wasn't, I'll observe this, but I'm thinking about this in retrospect as I got older. And this whole like civil rights thing became a big deal. And we would see men protest and saying, I'm a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about and thought about these people that I see every week. They come to church, they're deacon somebody, trustee so-and-so, something. But most of the time at their jobs, they've been called boy, Tom, John, da-da-da-da-da. You got your work clothes on. And what made me notice that, I would realize some of those evenings sometimes, that these folks would go home from their job, they would clean up, they would come, they would have on their ties and sport jackets. And I mean, they never came on, they had a different uniform, I'll put it like that. And they became Mr. Some, Deacon somebody, Mrs. somebody. I mean, that's where you kind of got your identity and value. That's my assessment of what I saw. And as I said, you know, I was grown up looking back at that and saying, oh yeah, that's where you got to be somebody. That was a place that meant so much, that you could have roots there and, you know, be respected. And
right.
So that's why I'm saying I can't answer the stuff about legacy and all that, because I think that made a tremendous impact on those people's lives and quality of life. I mean, they moved, bought houses in Mount Pleasant and bought Buicks and whatever, and educated their children and took care of their families. And there were families, not just, I mean, families. The whole time that we were there. I mean, and still are, because I have people there that I grew up with. They now as old as I am, with grandchildren and all of that. So, and they still connect there. They still connect. So that's my answer. That's a non-answer.
That's a good one, because what you're saying, they may not have been validated on their jobs. They may not have been validated within mainstream society, but they were validated in the church.
That's where you could come to be somebody.
Yes.
And they took that so seriously. And that was the biggest part of their identity, in my view.
Right.
I remember the ladies, the wives and the ladies, and I was talking to something happened. I guess somebody died or something. And, you know, people were talking about, oh, you remember Miss So-and-so. But I remember these ladies just being, everybody had Sunday clothes and hats were the big thing. And, you know, glove, I mean, you had to show up correct. You wore your Sunday clothes and you would, you know, have your whole little protocols together, and your kids would sit with you and they wouldn't be snickering and talking and none of that. They weren't having that. But when we were talking about these ladies and what you learned from them as a sense of style, and how they always talked about, you know, don't talk back, don't do this, you act like a lady, and young ladies don't do X. But this kind of influenced, you know, generations of people's respect and behaviors more than anything else. Because there was a bunch of you don't do's. And you know that we came up in the day of the look. You didn't have to say a word, you just do the side eye look. Everybody understood what that meant.
My daughter talks about that with me.
Oh yeah, you do the side eye too.
Oh goodness, yes. You know,
yeah, I can see you kind of doing it now. But those are the values, as far as I'm concerned, that made that whole wheel turn. And you know, here again, that's that era. Now, you know, the Moss thing, I don't think in terms of, because I think people have grown to a point that his whole is different. It's just different. And not that you don't have that same kind of thing, but you know, we've come a long way since then. We've moved forward since then. And I just think his impact was different. It's like chapters in a book. You know, so that was then, okay, we got this time, now we got something else going on, and it's just maybe a life story kind of thing, or a story of the church, maybe.
So you're there with Reverend Colvin.
Yes.
Yeah. You've really seen a change.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because all of these people are so distinctly different.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when Reverend Colvin first came and I was doing some installation stuff and working on, he was born in 1974. My dad died in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying, okay, here's a whole nother, whole nother mindset, experience thing. It's interesting. But I think the great thing is that you can thread the needle. You can just thread through all of that because life happens and stuff changes, and that's it. I can tell by the numbers, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
So now y'all got to be tired of hearing me talking.
No, it's been very informative.
Okay.
Fantastic.
And what you talked about with accountability and respectability, I talk about that as the politics of respectability, right?
Okay.
Within the community.
Okay.
Don't necessarily see today, but was a very, very much a part of the community back then.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
Very much so.
And see, there were all the resources you needed were there. For example, we had lawyer John Kellogg. He was a big deal. We had doctors. I mean, so if you were a member and you were sick, you go to the doctor that you know, Dr. Smith. If you had a problem, your kid got locked up, or you had a legal issue, you go see John Kellogg.
Mm-hmm.
And if you couldn't, you say, Reverend Hoover, I need you to call. I need you to, but it was that kind of thing. You didn't have to worry about, like, everything you needed was right there. There was somebody there that could take care of whatever your issue was, serious or not. There was somebody there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We live next door to our doctor, Dr. Ward.
Yeah. I mean, it's just that's the way life worked. Because still there weren't that many resources still available to Black people in the 50s and the 60s. You just could pick up a phone or walk in somewhere, but you could certainly, if you needed some money or something, Reverend Hoover, come on, I'll take you down to Quincy Savings Bank.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how it works. Let's go to the bank. And then you get ties with the Central National Bank. And so then you got you just grow into whole nother levels of things that you're available to offer and to access, more access than offer.
Mm-hmm. This is great.
Fantastic interview.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Wonderful way to spend a Friday afternoon. This was
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad I could be helpful.